The Future of Money, Governance, and the Law is hosted by the Government Blockchain Association, a worldwide community to connect, communicate, and collaborate. This show is produced by Podtex. To learn more and how to host your own show, go to www.podtex.com. Podtechs. Podtex, your partners in podcasting.
Hi, my name is Gerard Daché. I'm the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association, and I am thrilled today we have Dean Markunas with us. Dean Markunas is the leader of the GPA Land Titling Working Group and has been a longtime supporter of GPA. John, welcome to the program.
Hey, Gerard, thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with you on blockchain and real estate and the Government Blockchain Association.
Excellent. So, John, do me a favor. Tell our listeners a little bit about your background. What did you do before blockchain? How did you sort of stumble into this whole thing? Tell your journey into this place.
Yeah, I think, Gerard, thanks. My journey is not so much different than I think other people who've come from different backgrounds or different business sectors or industries and then somehow landed into the blockchain technology space or other technologies. I have a 30-year background in real estate, mostly commercial real estate. I've played many roles throughout the years. I've worked as a real estate broker. In fact, I've worked as a real estate broker in 3 different countries. And I've worked for real estate developers. I've worked as an investor, and I've worked with investment professionals investing in commercial real estate. But where I really turned things around was when I started working in the title insurance industry. I was a VP for the First American Title Insurance organization. I was the VP for Latin American expansion. In fact, I was hired to open up Brazil for title insurance, which is purely an American product, which has gone out to other countries around the world. But this precipitated eventually my move to Brazil and my becoming an independent consultant out of the corporate world. I was hired to open up Brazil for title insurance, but it didn't happen for a lot of different reasons. And so I decided to convert my experience thus far in Brazil in real estate and title insurance, and I became a consultant to businesses, real estate companies and tech companies that were going into Brazil. And I moved down there in 2012, and I worked there for 4 years. And I represented companies and worked with companies that were looking for a foothold in Brazil, which was pretty hot at the time, just before the recession came about. And I helped them with due diligence and partnerships and strategic alliances and marketing and research due diligence and getting a foothold there. I returned to the United States in 2016. Brazil at the time was in a full-fledged recession. And I came back to the United States, New York City, and I was looking for sort of regain my momentum that I got down there. And guess what happened? I saw an article about Bitcoin. And I was sort of familiar with Bitcoin, and I knew a little bit about cryptocurrencies. So I looked it up and I did some research, and I was looking to invest in Bitcoin. And the advice I got at the time in 2016 was, if you cannot afford to lose money investing in Bitcoin, don't do it. At that time,
Wait a minute. 2016, what was the Bitcoin price at that point?
I think it was about $600, $400 to $600 a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself, John, this is risky. I'm not quite sure how this works. I have to open up a wallet. I have to give away a lot of information to open up a wallet to participate in Bitcoin. So I said to myself, nah, not right now. But the turning point, the tipping point for me, Gerard, was the underlying technology that powered Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies now. And I was absolutely fascinated. I was fascinated not so much from the tech standpoint, Gerard, but what it could do to help the real estate industry overall, and I was hooked.
Are there dents in your forehead for all the times that you just jabbed your forehead in regret?
In terms of?
Just, I could have had a V8 kind of.
Oh, you mean something like investing in Bitcoin? Well,
yeah.
The answer is yes and no. I'm not a speculative person. I'm somewhat risk adverse. In retrospect, certainly, I think in fact, I do own some Bitcoin. I own 2 Satoshis. And we know how much Satoshis are worth. Not much, but I did take the plunge. But I decided I decided to refocus. Instead of taking on the investment cryptocurrency exchange scene, I refocused in research blockchain technology. And since had been working in real estate for many years, I immediately saw the applications to it and the benefits and the how it could really impact. I think I don't use the word disrupt, but impact and evolutionize. I don't use the word revolutionize, evolutionize the industry, and I got hooked. So by the end of 2016, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you did a lot of work in the area as a due diligence, right?
That's right.
So as you roll the story forward, so we're in 2016. As you roll the story forward, I really want to hear about what your thoughts are with how blockchain and due diligence work together in the real estate space. But keep rolling. We're at 2016 now.
Right. So I decided to jump into the arena, if you will, and I became after some time after researching, I transformed myself into a blockchain specialist, if you will, devoted to the real estate industry with a focus actually on land registries and land governance. And the reason I focused on land governance and land registries and cadastral systems was because of my title insurance background, which was directly related to title and to recording of deeds, but also because I had lived in Mexico for 5 or 6 years previously, and I lived in Brazil, and I was exposed to everything that new technologies could fix: corruption, the lack of transparency, inefficiencies. And I had been exposed to and worked in, and it was associated with land registries, especially in Mexico and Brazil, which are still developing countries. And I have a special allegiance to that sector now, even today, where I think blockchain will certainly help the world, especially developing countries. So I've stayed focused on land registries and cadastral systems and land administration with a focus using blockchain.
So, I hear people telling stories all the time about some of the corruption in the land titling space. Can you give us some ideas of the kinds of things that were happening and how you think blockchain potentially impact those things?
Gerard, you're opening up a can of worms here, Pandora's box. Let me give you a very concrete example right here in the United States, a developed country. And you'd think blockchain would be one of the last places, or blockchain in the United States would be one of the last places to be used or adopted. But did you know that the number one white collar crime in the United States, according to the FBI, is mortgage fraud? Huge losses, $1 billion losses.
Really?
And the reason for this.
But is that more in the financing space, or is that more in the land title?
No, that's
space?
That's on the mortgage side. That's mortgage financing, but it is directly related to legal title, how it's held, how it can be accessed, and it's also related to documents that can be altered quite easily. In fact, altering a mortgage or even altering a legal title. So you wouldn't.
So how does that work? When play that out in terms of what a fraud in that space would look like.
Well, you mean here in the United States in terms of mortgage fraud? I guess. Okay, but let me back up just a second. A lot of people don't think there's corruption in the United States because we're so advanced, or other countries like Denmark and Finland, and Canada, but there is, and surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize that. Obviously, there's much more corruption and inefficiencies in developing countries. But mortgage fraud is one that is so easily accessed. I should say the documentation to that are so easily accessed, the documentation and documents, that it's somewhat easy to manipulate either through collusion or directly in the alteration of documents, and then presenting them to, how do you say it, oblivious or ignorant buyers of properties. Or people who are looking to invest in land or housing. And mortgage fraud is where you can manipulate the title to the property, let's say in your name, and subsequent to that, get a new loan, and then somehow cash out of that loan. Cashing out would be selling the property, in a sense. So there's a great deal of manipulation from the mortgage side, leading to the manipulation of the legal title side that's actually held in the recorder's offices in the counties. But that's just an example here.
So connect the dots for me. You spent all this time seeing this fraud in the mortgage and the land titling space. You started learning about Bitcoin and the blockchain technology. How did you start connecting the dots between those two?
Well, you mean in terms of, Gerard, you mean like in terms of the benefits of blockchain and helping the industry?
No, in terms of how did you how did you get into doing blockchain and real estate work, right? I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of people that were very resistant. You probably came up to people and said, "Hey, we could use blockchain and it'll get rid of all the corruption." And the people that were doing all the corruption probably said, "No, we don't want to do that." Like, how did you actually, John's story in terms of how you actually got into blockchain?
Right. Well, this is what happened, and this is how I got started in the space itself, overall in the real estate sector. I started to work with startups that were working. This is 2017 now. There are many startups there. Some have flamed and burned out. Some are still there. But I started working with startups that needed assistance in understanding blockchain and also understanding how to promote it and promote it and market the technology with their businesses. So I started working with startups. And one of the first startups I worked with was a company called Ubiquity, which is a land registry platform. And they had done one of the first pilot programs in Brazil in 2017. And a super great case study came out of that, done by some academicians from Canada and Brazil. And I worked with them on expansion in Brazil. And then I found another client in another sector of the real estate industry, which is timeshare, a company out of Singapore called Raydao. Raydao is a technology platform which produces different projects, and one of those projects was a project for timeshare. Then a third company came along looking for help, and I got into the space of investment, asset tokenization, fractionalization of commercial real estate. Subsequent to that, I've worked with several smaller companies that are planning or developing platforms for recordation of titles, not only titles in the real estate land registry sector, but also in other areas like aviation, titles to airplanes. Yeah, titles to airplanes, which is not unlike a title to, let's say, a piece of land. So that's sort of where I got my start in terms of my consulting business, if you will, which, by the way, is my consulting company is now known as Power of Chain Consultancy, LLC. We're incorporated in the state of Wyoming right now. And
we're going to put information about your contact information and all that stuff in the show notes. So anybody who wants to get in touch with John can reach him there. Plus, we'll share a bunch of other information at the end of the podcast. John, this seems like starting something in this space is like going up against a big giant roadblock, right? Because I think, I live in Fairfax, Virginia, and there's the government property office, and they, what they say about government technology, right, is it's yesterday's technology tomorrow, right? And it seems like it's such a hard lift, such a heavy lift to go into a place like this and say, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and, you use the term evolve, but most people use the term revolution. Let's revolutionize this thing. Let's totally shake things up. I got to imagine you get all kinds of pushback. And how do you get over that kind of hurdle?
Well, I learned a long time ago. I stay away from words like revolutionize and disruption, because I don't think blockchain is actually revolutionizing anything right now, perhaps in the fintech area. but it's going to evolutionize the way things are done. It's going to take a while. And when I'm at conferences speaking and or moderating panels and speakers, I often ask the question, how long is it going to take for mass adoption in this sector, let's say, real estate, or in this sector, healthcare? So the thing is, blockchain for land registry is especially tough versus, let's say, the private sector in real estate, which would be transactional work, doing deals, investment, asset tokenization, which is more on the private side. That's accelerating faster, that technology for those platforms for fractionalization of real estate and so on. Heading over onto the other side of that, where all of the titles and deeds are registered, the land registry, these are government entities. And government bureaucracy is the number one. I call them pain points in the friction of real estate, and government bureaucracy is one of those. I have about 15 or 17 pain points that sort of get in the way of blockchain adoption, especially for land registries. I always say there has to be the political will for a blockchain technology or any other technology to be accepted and adopted and used. So on the government side, in land registry, there isn't a lot of big political will to look at blockchain and utilize it. Why is that? First of all, they don't know about it. There's an old joke, Gerard. It goes something like this. They said, I say more people would be using blockchain if they knew about it. So one of the biggest things that we are trying to do, especially with GPA and the Land Titling Working Group, are three things, essentially. Educate land registry officials, employees, and the other players surrounding that. The second thing is educate, and the third is education. It's about education first. Right. So we want to educate land registry officials throughout the world, global, and we want to make sure that those that are the other players that are involved with land registries, the land surveyors, the appraisers, the buyers and sellers, the mortgage companies, they're also involved with a transaction, are also educated. So that's the first thing. But second, indigenous to, yeah.
Well, yeah, let me circle back around to that. So you told us a little bit about your story and kind of how you got into this thing. Tell us a little bit about your journey with GPA. How did you find out about GPA? What prompted you to move forward? What happened?
Right. Okay. Remember now, I mentioned that I made the transition from being a consultant to companies, real estate companies, and real estate tech companies, 2016 to blockchain and blockchain technology for real estate, and throughout the late 2016 and early 2017, I was doing a massive amount of research on not only blockchain but itself. But who was involved with it? The players, the companies, the tech people, other people who are interested in it, associations and organizations. And as I was doing that, I came across several groups and a lot of information. And lo and behold, I came across, by chance, actually, the Government Blockchain Association, thanks to you, Gerard, in early 2017. That it caught.
Did I reach out to you? Was that like a LinkedIn message
or something?
No,
it was a simple Google search, I think, on blockchain. But what happened next was I did get in touch with, or somebody got in touch with me through my networking, and they suggested that I get in touch with you due to my interest in land registries and cadastral systems, get in touch with you to head up the Land Titling Working Group, which I did, I think, in the second quarter of 2017. We had a conversation, and I became the leader of the working group, shortly thereafter. And so it's been a couple of years now, almost 2 years that I've been working.
So, John, interestingly enough, we actually became an association in March of 2017. Right. So you must have got connected literally as GPA was being born. We were a meetup. We were a meetup in 2016, starting in August 2016 was our very first meetup. We had 2 people show up. By the beginning of 2017, January, February, we were having like 40 people who were meeting at a restaurant. and you literally came on board right as we started to come out of our
Exactly. It was
seat.
just as soon as you probably got your website up, posted, and it got started to get.
We didn't even have our website up because I don't think our website went up until the summer of 2017.
Right.
2018 was our first full year in existence as a full calendar year in existence. So, John, you've been there from the very, very beginning. When I think your working group might have been the very first working group.
It could have been. I mean, there are several working groups now, but it must have been because the leadership slot for that working group was open, and I grabbed onto it due to my interest. Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, you've done a great job. So, what was it about us that you liked? I mean, I think that you started the working group, and then tell us a little bit about the kinds of stuff you've been doing with the working group. You were talking a little bit before about education, but share with us kind of what you've been involved with since.
Right. I think one of the first things I was concerned about was getting soliciting members to participate and join the working group, and it took off slowly. And you don't have to have a lot of people, within a working group as members. It just depends upon their commitment and interest and activity and participation. But we started off, I think, with like 3 or 4 of my closest friends, if you will, joining the group, and then expanded from there over the next year and a half. And we have about 50 members now. And that was terrific. But we needed one of the first things we did, I think, to help galvanize the group was to address the message of education. And so one of the first initiatives I proposed to the group, which we jumped on, was the creation or development of a slide deck, a very simple slide deck or PowerPoint to illustrate who GBA is, what it does, its mission, and then talk about what the working group is all about in terms of its mission, its goals, and how it's going to change things. And eventually we expanded that slide deck to include some things related to blockchain in the real estate industry, such as prerequisites for blockchain adoption, integration levels, pilot programs, and actual use case studies. And as we got along, we also added a chapter or a section on the future of blockchain and cutting through the hype and looking at where blockchain would be with land registry through a telescope and seeing where it's going to head, or through a crystal ball, maybe. So that's the first initiative we worked on. The other 2 initiatives, which we're working on now, we're working on a guideline or a manual for land registry officials, and again, globally, who can look at or read and educate themselves. And this is a promotional piece that would promote blockchain and GPA and get government servants and civil servants on board with it in terms of uncovering the blockchain sector. And then we're working on most.
Listen, I want to come down on this in a second. Talk about this more. But before we sort of slide away from the last topic, you've had a chance to the slide deck that you put together and all this information, this informative material. I know you shared it with me, and I shared it with different universities, and it's been shared all over the place. Where are some of the places where the information where your working group is put together about blockchain and land titling?
Oh, you mean some?
Where's some of the chapters and So tell us about those places where you
absolutely.
You shared
I think one of the greatest things, the nicest things about GPA are its chapters and its global outreach. And what I did from the beginning was try to get in touch with chapter chairs globally throughout the world and let them know who I am and what our working group was all about, and let them know there's a resource available in case your jurisdiction or your chapter, your geographical region, your country is interested in specifics on blockchain and land registry. And from there, we had a tremendous amount of feedback because a lot of people were looking for information. They're looking for sources of data and on blockchain use and use case studies. And so over the years, over the last couple of years anyway, I've been able to do a fair amount of presentations. I was in San Juan, Puerto Rico last September. I was down there. I was invited down.
Giancarlo, right?
Gonzalez, yeah. Terrific conference. It was a half day symposium, if you will. And there are two things that went on. They had just finished a 4-year program in converting from paper to digital. So they invited down the CEO of Invid, which was the company that did that transition from paper to digital for the land registry. And he was there was an update of that process. And then I did a presentation to sort of augment or complement, where do you go from digital? What's the next step? Where can you improve? So I did a presentation on blockchain, going from digital to blockchain adoption for that. I do several remote presentations throughout the world. I did one from Moscow last year. I did most recently for one of the chapters in Virginia, a remote using Zoom. And I was also in Athens, Greece, November of last year, representing GPA at a conference, an international conference, in fact, of civil engineers and land surveyors, mostly from the Euro region and Southeast Asia. And I did a terrific, it was a terrific, conference with a lot of people interested, mostly from the civil engineer and land surveyor side on blockchain use. And these people didn't have really much of an idea what it was.
Yeah, I mean, every time I come onto a LinkedIn, I see there's a post from you, and you're in some far off country, or you're doing a Zoom meeting. You're supporting our chapters globally. So we have chapters now in about 100 cities around the world. And John, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of guys that serve the whole organization like you do.
No, I appreciate that. But let me give you another example, Gerard. The last 2 weeks, my goal was to reach out to Africa and specific to the country of Nigeria. I've had two terrific conversations with our 2 chapter chairs, one in Lagos, the city of Lagos, and the other in Port Harcourt with Faith Titus. And so
yeah, she's awesome.
What we're doing now is now that they're more aware of what's available from the land registry, and they educated me certainly on the status of land registry in Nigeria. We have some momentum now. We're trying to create some sort of a next event, perhaps a remote presentation through them to some land registry officials there. And so I was really happy to see that they were so well receiving of information on blockchain for land registry, because the African countries are developing, and those are the countries that need it the most. So that's exciting. That's a good concrete example of how it can work.
Yeah, and for those people who don't know, we have an African lead. Armand Nugunti is the lead for all of Africa. He's out of Cameroon, and in fact, we visited him, I guess, sometime last year. And Africa is just ripe for all kinds of implementations.
Absolutely.
Blockchain. Absolutely. We're really excited.
In fact, I didn't mean to leave Armand out. Armand Nugunti, he's also in the loop on what we're trying to do in Nigeria. And my next conversation, I think I have a program now with our chair in Uganda. So I'm trying to hit all the countries where we have a presence and get some momentum going, not just for a specific country, but I think for the whole continent.
So has GPA been helpful to you in your ability to connect, communicate, and collaborate with other professionals in the
absolutely.
space?
It's been because of GPA's, I guess, depth and breadth of scope. It's international, and like you said, you have over 90 chapters, and there's a lot of working groups, and I do indeed connect with the other working group leaders to see what they're doing and how we can also benefit from networking. But it's a platform to reach out to a lot of different people, and for me, it's been a platform to reach out to the world. In fact, specific to my work in land registration, land governance, land administration, and ultimately, the holy grail is economic development.
Right. Wow. So that's a big can of worms here. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you see blockchain impacting economic
Yeah, in the
development?
beginning, Gerard, it was more like blockchain for recording of titles and deeds. Okay, but really, there's a front end to that, and there's a back end to that. And what I realized when I was speaking to land registry officials, the just the recording of a deed um, didn't resonate as much as what happens afterwards. So when I talk about beforehand, there's a lot of work that goes into producing or legalizing a parcel, let's say, and that includes land. Includes land surveyors, certainly appraisers. It can include financial lending institutions, and if it's a transaction, it'll include a lot of other people like buyer and seller, attorneys, and so forth. So on the front end, you have a lot of work going on a transaction and a lot of data. Then you have this so-called process called recordation of title to show legal title. And then after that, what happens? And that was the piece that was missing. What happens after a title or a deed is recorded? And does it just sit there for people to look at and to notice and to acknowledge? Well, certainly that's it, but it goes much way beyond that. And that gets back to leads to the economic development because there's so much data that comes out of a real estate or a piece of land, ownership, parcel size, a lot of different things that related to the owner, gender, and so land administration officials really were looking for something more. And what blockchain does, it helps aggregate all this data and helps format it into a user-friendly way for a land administration official to really look at land and its components and its attributes and the data itself and come up with better, more efficient land policies, which in turn certainly impact the economic development of that region or that country. So there's a huge opportunity there, and I'm on a big kick right now for data and data aggregation through blockchain use.
How can people help you if folks want to get involved in land titling or economic development? So for those who don't know, anybody who is in the government can join GPA for free, right? Our goal is to have every government employee in the world that is interested in blockchain and cryptocurrencies to be a member of GPA, so we can help government members at all levels connect, communicate, and collaborate. But John, if somebody's interested in this topic, right, land titling, economic development, what do you need? What are you looking for? How would you like to?
Absolutely, I think the first thing is I'd love to be able to have a conversation with people who are interested, passionate, or already working in the space and have made a vocation out of it. Certainly, I think one great conduit is to join GPA, and I will promote my working group. If you're interested in blockchain and in land registry, land administration, that's a terrific opportunity to start to get involved with it. Joining GPA and joining the working group, land titling working group.
And you're also speaking. You're also speaking in September on the subject as well, right? So I'm sorry, I just interrupted you. Continue talking about what you're looking for, and then polish that up with maybe connecting
Absolutely,
with us
sure.
in September.
So I think there's the land administration, the land governance, which is sort of the same thing, and land registries or cadastral systems, as they're called in certain parts of Europe, it's a global industry, if you will. It's a global process. Each country has different levels of needs. Just to give you an example, many countries, including the United States, actually, there's some counties that are still paper-based, but many developing countries are still paper-based and haven't gotten through to processing documentation on a digital basis. One interesting thing that I often mention when I'm out public speaking, did you know that 70% of land in developing countries throughout the world is undocumented? And that affects 1.5 billion people that would be subject or could be subject to different conflicts, evictions, encroachments, and more. So the need for a system, which would include blockchain, is unprecedented right now in order to manage it and create more efficiencies and bring things to a much more transparent level. So this in turn means that there are a lot of people throughout the world who are working in land registries. There are other organizations that are involved in it, from the UN on down. And so I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from being involved with like a GBA type of working group to actually help their countries understand more about blockchain and how it could impact their geographical regions, land registries, and, like I said, ultimately economic development. So, with that in mind, I'm looking forward to attending the GBA symposium coming up September 14th and 15th. In fact, this past couple of weeks, I've been preparing a presentation which indeed goes beyond, as I mentioned, goes beyond the simple recordation of a title. It's the governance of money, which flows from economic development, and I think those two things are very tied together when you talk about governance of money and land registry and economic development. So that's what we're working on right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing you down there in Arlington.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. We've got folks coming from the World Bank. I know we've gotten word that somebody's coming from the IMF. I'm still waiting to confirm that. We got tech giants like IBM and Deloitte that are going to be there. You know, you're in the
Right.
you're up in New York, John. Do you have any connections with UN and folks that might be have more
I
of
do,
a national
but
background?
it's somewhat Eurocentric right now. When I mentioned I did a presentation at a conference in Athens, Greece, to international land surveyors and to civil engineers. And many of these land surveyors belong to, some of them anyway, belong to the UN's European Commission on Economic Development, and they also belong to a group called the WPLA, which is the World Public Land Administration. So I had gotten involved with these folks from that conference who belonged to the WPLA, and I've been invited to, this goes back a couple of months, I was invited to become an independent helper, if you will, or an independent external expert on developing blockchain outreach materials, promotion, not only promotion, educational materials for the WPLA. And for that region, there's 56 countries that belong to that, mostly European and some also into Southeast Asia. So what I've been doing recently is like more Eurocentric, I guess, through the UN and the WPLA.
Have you had any contact with Shiv Agrawal in
Boy,
London?
I've talked to Shiv all the time via email, and I had one conversation with him. Absolutely, yeah. It's been a tremendous source.
Yeah, it's a Shiv runs for the. Oh, he's great. Shiv runs our European lead. So GBA's got a European lead, an Asian lead, an African lead. We don't have a South American lead yet. We
Absolutely, yeah. I've been in touch with Shiv. Tremendous resource for not only UK but for European. In touch with Daniel Yim for the Asian outreach, and certainly to Armand Negati for the African outreach as well, regional outreach.
It's just amazing, this network of blockchain professionals. I mean, what we did is in August of 2016 we had a meetup, right? And then somehow between there and today, we now have 15,000 people all over the world that are working together, that are connecting people, and it's just an incredible, humbling thing to see folks like you just come to the table.
The thing is, if I could just throw out some advice here, or maybe some suggestions. to people like myself, and to people who are in my shoes, or there are other people that are out there in the blockchain world who are interested in it or already working in it. Don't be shy in reaching out to people who are working in the space. My advice is to share ideas, thoughts, and by communicating. And I'm really big on communicating. Don't be shy even to pick up a phone and call somebody. If you have some questions, if you want to get some advice, if you want to give some advice, or if you want to simply create a networking collaboration on an informal basis or a more formal basis, reaching out to peers and colleagues is extremely important. There's such a huge need still for education and learning.
Let me tag on to that for a second though, because I think there's a lot of people that reach out to us all the time, right? And sadly, 90% of the time it's people who they want to take, right? And so I would say if you really want to get in the space, my perspective was I don't know anything about the technology. I don't know any of the people. I don't know the business. I have absolutely nothing to contribute, right? But I wanted to get in the space, right? So I said, well, we'll just have a meetup, right? We'll invite some people. I'll do some research, and most people didn't know anything, right? So I could do an hour's worth of research at that time to be smarter than most of the people. We were not necessarily to be smarter, but to bring value, right? And I would say, by all means, just like John just said, reach out to people, connect, but come to the table and offer something. Volunteer to help out at an event, or volunteer to say, hey, listen, I really like your videos and stuff like that. Is there anything I can do to help? And you'll find that there's so many people that have so many projects and they need so much help. And if you're just willing to get in there and actually just give something, right? The doors, the opportunities just
Gerard,
fly open.
Giving is getting also. Once you contribute, there's a certain amount of karma that goes in this. It'll come back to you in terms of relationships, new education, new information, which just builds on what you already know. So giving is getting, in my opinion. And the more you give, the more you're going to get back in terms of what you're looking for, what you want to learn, what you're trying to do with your end game.
And we're a really weird organization in that we tell people, hey, come to our organization. Now, first of all, we make a lot of stuff freely available. So you can come to the website. There's 8 gigs worth of informative material and videos and PowerPoint presentations. You just download for free. So we just give a ton of stuff away, right? And those are the takers. And honestly, we're happy to do that, right? But the thing that's really funny for guys like you, John, we're an organization where we say, hey, you need to pay to be part of this organization. And then once you get in this organization, we're going to ask you to work your rear end off, right? We're going to ask you to really be a leader, right? And we don't want to get everybody in the world in the GPA Association. I mean, everybody's curious, but the folks we really want in are the guys like John that they look around and they say, hey, how can I be of value? And then the next thing you know, they're all over the world creating value. But it's kind of like farming, right? You got to put the seeds in the ground and water it first, and then
absolutely, you have to sow some seeds first.
And John, you're a great example of a professional who's smart, who's caring, who's given and sacrificed, and I just hope huge amounts of success for you, and just committed to help you and your group any way that we can.
No, I appreciate it, Gerard. In fact, it takes time, it takes effort, but it will slowly get done in terms of the initiatives that not only my group are doing, but the initiatives of other working groups and chapters. It's just a matter of chipping away at the block, no pun intended, chipping away at the obstacles or challenges that are in front of us in terms of educating people on blockchain and promoting it for good, for social good, for economic development. And then it'll happen. So all of us doing this, whether it's in healthcare or cybersecurity or digital identity or land registry, it all sort of helps each other get the job done, which is getting good things done with blockchain through GPA. And so I'm a true believer in that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you September 14th and 15th down in the Washington, D.C. area. So one more time, how can, if they want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
I think the best way is my email, my Power of Chain Consultancy company email, and I'll spell that out. That's jmarkunas at powerofchain.com, jmarkunas at powerofchain.com. And my Skype, I always open the Skype calls. That's john.dean.markunas. And I'm on LinkedIn. I love to connect. I love to chat. And like I said before, for people who are maybe listening to this and wondering how they can get into blockchain, how to further their cause or to further someone else's cause, is to not be shy to either pick up a phone. I do that sometimes, or to shoot an email out, or send a text message, or send a message off of a LinkedIn and introduce yourself and get involved.
All right. Well, John, it was great talking to you.
Thanks so much, Gerard.
I'll see you in September. Have a great day.
The Future of Money Governance and the Law is brought to you by the Government Blockchain Association, or GBA. The podcast brings together leaders in the public and private sector to discuss how government and industry can work together. We talk about how to enhance the integrity of our institutions and the quality of life for the people they serve.